Right, where to start? Well, the Grand National weights were revealed this week. I don't think there were too many surprises. Iron Maximus heads the weights, mark of 167. You wouldn't expect him to be shown too much mercy. Was there anything that jumped off the page at you, Richard?
Not these days, really, to be honest. I think it's more the entries as a whole, working out where the cut might come with a reduced field. But there's not the same, you know, when I was growing up, I give you all a few years then, you know, those traditional horses that had entry form, you know, were severely inconvenienced and had a very different set of weights. And in fact, it's that absence and the preservation of those weights that was probably the Achilles heel of the race, actually, in the sense that, you know, you got a different handicap for entries. It didn't matter what you did in the close season. Now, people seem to be guarding their marks almost too jealously for the remainder of the season, and that might be an issue.
That's one race you haven't managed to get one in, isn't it?
Yeah, we haven't still got that type of horse yet. But
Yet.
Be nice one day, yeah. Be good, yeah.
OK, Megan, anything really strike you? Obviously, Ditchett's got 5 entries. There or from elsewhere, what caught your eye?
I gave a mention to Can Do Kid, who actually Dad said this morning could well run at Kempton next weekend, next weekend. I thought he was nicely weighted, 10-11. His form pretty good from the Coral Gold Cup. It's looking strong. He goes well fresh. I thought he was nicely weighted, and I really hope that he goes here. And I'd like to maybe see him not go for the cross country, but Stumptown. He fascinates me, this horse.
He's fascinated the British handicapper as well, who's put another few pound on his back.
Yeah, but he was sneakily impressive last time at Cheltenham, and Keith Donoghue was trying everything to make it look like he had to use plenty of fuel and really didn't have to. He won hard held.
He's not fooled Martin Greenwood, has he?
No, and that's the balance. I mean, you'll have had it actually with Lavender Hill Mob, and they almost need to run again just to make sure you're marked. You're looking at that mark so closely, and that's what everyone will be doing now, because the National does not have that implication of you need to have been there before. So as a result, it has a very different complexion to the field that it had 15, 20 years ago.
Well, I don't really want the next 4 minutes to be a monologue, so I hope you can all chip in, but...
Well, you were there, so you kick it off. You explain to everyone exactly what went on.
I've flown back overnight from Doha. Yesterday was supposed to be the running of the Emir's Sword. It's been postponed to today to a track half an hour down the road from where it was intended to be at Al Rayyan at Al Uqtar. And there were some dramatic and really unsatisfactory scenes. The racing on Friday, the first race was at 3 o'clock, the second race took place at 6:30, the last race took place at 11:40. Whilst there was was more than a deputation, a sort of lengthy, protracted argument about what was going to happen, because the bend was very slippery, and horses were slipping and sliding and going down on the bends. There was one fatality on Friday, though that wasn't related to the slipperiness of the track, and the international riders, particularly very high-profile riders like James Doyle, Mikel Barcelona, were not happy to ride. So therefore they had to decide what to do. Eventually they carried on with racing, having moved the bend alignment somewhat, and they carried on Friday. There were no further significant incidents, though the horses were still slipping. So fast forward to Saturday, they've moved to the inner track, which is more cambered, but again, the fact that the grass was only relayed last year and there was a big covering of grass and it was very, very slippery meant that in the first race that was run, which was a Group 2 Irish Thoroughbred Marketing Cup, 2 horses went down. One was fatally injured. One jockey, who is a really good local jockey, Stéphane Mazur, is in hospital with a broken shoulder, broken leg, and we've talked so much today about the dangers of this sport. It was frankly inexcusable to continue. They didn't. It's been moved to an alternative track today, but not before there was injury, fatality, and massive inconvenience to all the people that were involved. And somebody's got to take stock and decide, right, do we want to be taken seriously as a racing jurisdiction? And if so, what do we need to be putting in place before trying to move on next year? And that's before the next bit of the drama, which we'll come to in a moment. But
yeah, you've done very well. It's just a minute. You talk uninterrupted without repetition for just 2 minutes.
Have I managed to just about get across what happened out there?
You have. I mean, do you want me to pick up and link into the Boudot part of it?
Yeah, go on then.
Yes, because obviously the lack of riders was an issue.
Yeah, this was Friday.
And then my colleague...
quite extraordinary.
My colleague Mark Johnson then makes the announcement of the jockey changes, which include the announcement of Pierre-Charles Boudot.
I was walking up the side of the grandstand with Adrian Beaumont from the International Racing Bureau, and James Doyle was 50 yards ahead of me that way. And all three of us just stopped and went, because for those who aren't familiar, and Richard, you'll pick this up if I'm wrong, it's 4 years since Pierre-Charles Boudot rode?
Yes.
Former Cravache d'Or French champion jockey.
Yes, there were 2 suspensions, weren't there? One, I think, initially for substance abuse, and then the rape charge, which led to the licence being suspended. We should point out, I believe, and I've tried to do as much research on this as I can in the time available, he is not denied a licence in France. He just has not reapplied for one since his last one lapsed.
So the Ministry of the Interior in France have asked France Gallo not to licence him, which is why he's not licensed. He's not technically banned. So that kind of complicates the international reciprocity issue.
Because he was issued a local licence in the belief that it was not against the reciprocity issue, and so as a result he was able to ride. Should point out that the overweight for the initial ride was significant.
7 kilograms. He rode a stone overweight, effectively, and still won a handicap later in the card. So this simply added to this sort of surreal, unsettling and pretty unsatisfactory sequence of events. And France Gallo, I don't think, are best pleased, though they are remaining tight-lipped with a no comment at the moment. It's a very difficult situation, this, isn't it, James?
Very difficult. Yeah.
Not least because, I mean, the reception he got from his other riders, and so many there, after his success, was very positive. And I suppose it depends which way you look at these sort of events. Has it taken far too long to come to trial to decide one way or another? And so those that feel that he may be innocent feel that he's been denied, you know, he's riding out for Al Shikab over in Qatar, but have he been denied his, you know, right to go about his lawful duty? But if you're those that are involved in the plaintiff side of things, you're absolutely horrified that he was able to ride on the weekend.
And I think, interestingly, from a looking outside the bubble, the French newspapers, this was front-page news on mainstream papers, and that's not, you know, something that you particularly want to be involved with if you're a foreign jurisdiction, I wouldn't have thought.
No, and boundaries have clearly been crossed, haven't they? And it becomes very complicated as to where the boundaries really lie, but slightly inappropriate, I think the whole thing is really. In terms of the track, I was in Dubai sort of mid-January speaking with Carl Burke, head of Holloway Boy Running, and he was talking about potentially on his way home having to go via Qatar to see the track. He had obviously had reports for a while that it was in bad condition and wasn't sure whether he was going to send a horse over or not. And if it's been talked about for that long in advance that it's not in a good condition, trainers are having to fly in and out, it is not acceptable that they then said, OK, let's go ahead, just because they want it at the main track. It's got to be sorted. Well, if it's not fit for racing, it's not fit for racing. It's not safe.
What I can't understand is it's not just a parochial versus international thing, which sometimes can be the case when you get debates when there's an international race meeting. People come in from outside and complain, and the locals say it's fine. Alban Demille's been training in Doha for 30 years. He's the senior trainer there, and he's been telling them for months that this is not going to be ready. You've reseeded the track. The root growth isn't long enough. It's slippery. The grass is too long. It needs standing. It needs whatever, you know. And it's become the sort of law of ever diminishing returns with people who are very experienced in looking after the track kind of leaving and new people coming in. So.
And that's a common denominator a little bit, particularly in Dubai from 10 or 15 years ago when it was populated by people who had a far greater degree of racing experience. The only thing I would say from my experience in the Middle East is when things begin to go pear-shaped, there's a lot of face-saving in order to get through to the end of the card. And as a result, some of the decision-making isn't great. I would love to have been a fly on the wall when the discussion for Pierre-Charles Boudot and the potential consequences, whether anyone even had any inclination or understanding of the ramifications of that jockey change or not. I doubt they did.
Let's move on to a story that is ostensibly about Rebecca Menzies and her taking a lien, isn't it, a possession of the horses in lieu of unpaid fees from the racing club. Just remind me the name of the...
I want to make sure I get this right. I think it is called the Racehorse Owners Group,
Club.
I think, or club. There are many, many similar names. Red and White Diamonds, which is how I know all the colours, but they're the ones.
But, James, I mean, this is a global theme, really, isn't it? You know, trainers not being paid, and then there are club members, syndicate members who aren't getting the enjoyment. They've paid the person hasn't paid the fees. What can the sport do to protect you and Rebecca and other trainers against this sort of thing?
Well, firstly, you know, bills need to be paid. Horses are expensive to keep, and it affects your cash flow if you're not getting paid. So it's a nightmare for, especially if you've got plenty. If you've got one horse for someone, your business can cope with that. But when there's quite a few, it puts pressure on the whole system. But what we can do, I think syndicates, big syndicates, may have to pay through Weatherby's or something like that. So the money has to be there. How they're going to do it, but it needs to be something like that. They need to be, so these owners are protected. They're paying their money. It's going somewhere safe. They know the trainer's going to get it. So it's going to go for the horse.
So actually the person who runs the syndicate is simply a manager rather than someone in custody of all their cash.
Where the problem lies is if that horse isn't 100% sold out, which not many of them are, they've got to bridge the gap.
Yes, unless the trainer agrees to take a bit of the pain, I suppose.
Well, exactly, yeah. But I think it's a safer way going forward.
Rebecca's been quite brave here, I think, getting out there, getting on the front foot and quite rightly, protecting her position.
Yeah, 100%. She's done the right thing, and we all have problems with people not paying, and it's great that she's put it in the public light.
Yeah, look, my former hat as an accountant, this is an area of the sport that's severely neglected. I fail to understand how owners are allowed, forget syndicates for a second, how owners are allowed to move horses from one yard to another while still owing the previous trainer. And there's got to be some system that, even if you're in dispute, that it's put into a central pot whilst arbitration takes place. But you must not be allowed just to continue to run up debts. And the other thing from a syndicate perspective is take the number of shares, multiply by the amount of money, and then work out whether it's a good idea or not. As James said, quite often they're not actually selling that full multiple, which masks it. And to be fair, those that would be in favour of syndicates would be sitting here saying that the BHA have implemented greater regulation in this area. But at the end of the day, as James said, it's a question of one bad apple can really spoil it. But the fundamental requirement to lodge money when you owe and take a horse away from a trainer, I am still staggered that we don't have that within our rules.
OK. Talking of rules, Eric McNamara was deemed to have breached the rules of racing in Ireland when his mount Ferns was considered not to have been allowed to run on his merits at Clonmel. And we're going to take a look at this now. The horse you want to be looking for is in the green cap with the white sleeves. Now you can see just to the eye, racing a little awkwardly with head out to the left around the bend. And now this is a central plank of Eric and the rider's defence against the censure they've received. Megan, go first here and talk me through and tell me whether you think they were deserving of bans and fines.
Oh, I think this is a really tricky one. You can clearly see the horse is looking a bit awkward, but he's also being what looks to be fairly well held on to. It looks to be a bit of a combination of both. The rider has, however, been positive at the last two fences, and Richard, we were talking earlier and saying he made a bit of a mistake 4 out. If he'd have fully let go of his head, how many places would he have made up? I'm not too sure. He had been running well and well supported in the market over hurdles prior to this. Strangely, we were looking, couldn't find any starting prices at all for this race, which...
Yeah, I think that's just a computer blip, but it didn't help. But yeah, he'd fallen over fences the previous time, or he'd fallen the previous start. He did make a mistake and was ridden away from that fence. Then a lot appeared to be make of the hanging, and then he was good at the last two. He closed off. He probably wouldn't have won the tempo of the race. Just widen it out, because when you see an individual issue, it's quite difficult.
Yeah.
If you watch a race live and you think, wow, that caught my eye, but when you're looking at it back, it's quite difficult when you know. I just feel that generally we should use these sanctions more often, and the fact that they're not that used means that when one does happen, the inference is that this was a really bad case of cheating. Whereas I feel, you know, off the back of the Joyeuse combinations, I have no issues with requiring more runs for a handicap at all, whether it be 3, 4, 5 for certain races, because I think the handicapper should have as much information as he feels or she feels have at their disposal to make a handicap fair. And, you know, we might applaud Joyeuse winning and going up £15, but, you know, I just feel there should be more interaction between stewards and handicappers saying, I just want another run to see that. Because, you know, I called a race at Brighton, 0 to 55 nursery this year, where none of the 7 runners had finished in the first 7. Well, how on earth are you... And 2 of them went on to win 3 races, and the other 5 are useless. Yeah. But, you know, I mean, there's just no way.
And if 3 of them are trained by James Owen, you've got to...
I don't know, James, it's difficult. I fully appreciate, you know, that there is that balance to be trod, but I just think that sometimes we try and be far too precise there and just say, I need more info, I'm going to have a word with you, Nick, I didn't like that. Just that informality of approach rather than nothing, 40 days, you feel you've been branded a cheat.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first time I've seen that race, but, you know, I need to see it all. But if the horse had fallen on his previous start, you can see why they were half looking after it a bit like that. It's, you know, you go and put him on the deck again. Where are you going? Where are we going? And he looked an awkward ride to me. You know, looked a big brute. Jumped the last two well. You know, he gave him a kick at the last two. To be fair, he wasn't saying come here. He did give him a kick at the last two. He's finished off strong, but I totally agree. Another look at him rather than the ban.
Yeah, would you feel that, you know, if someone said that to you, you've had a 2-year-old that's finished down the field, and maybe you've got a nursery in mind because he's not going to be good enough to win a novice and what have you, and the handicapper says, still not sure, James, what I can give that mark. How would you take that? Do you feel there's a slight on you at the moment, or do you feel it's a legitimate request?
I wouldn't mind if he saw it again and gives a nice low mark.
Yeah, I suppose that's the danger. You just keep running down the field. But it is an interesting dilemma because obviously, you know, for those that have beaten a long way in T-rods, particularly I'm using nurseries as the best example, but you could use, you know, novice hurdles as well at small tracks. I don't know. Sometimes I just feel the handicappers should have as much at their disposal, and I have no issue if they ask for an extra run.
Is it not a slightly different and trickier situation here in that this was a novice handicap chase, so he's already got.
Oh, sure, yeah, no, it's a separate,
no,
it's a separate case really. But I just think generally, I want more. I don't want that to be an isolated issue. I'd like much more.
I hate having the last word in this seat, but I'm going to have it because my producer's saying we've got to hurry up. But I do think that you can watch that, and we've debated whether it's a good ride or injudicious ride or a bad ride, whatever. But you will see maybe a dozen more inactive rides a day, normally in maiden and novice hurdles.
And you should see the mistake 4 out as well, because he is ridden after that fence, to be fair. But as I say, I appreciate if you back that, you're not going to be...
the old consistency thing again, isn't it? Bert Black, Andrew Black, founder of Betfair, has suggested that really the betting landscape for horse racing is rather stolid and lacks a bit of dynamism and needs a bit of pep and some new ideas to get people betting and get people interested, particularly in a crowded market. Now, clearly, it's been pointed out, Richard, that one of the key problems, particularly with horse racing betting, is people not being able to get on before you do anything else.
100%.
What about his central premise that particularly each-way betting is really, you know, a thing of the past and makes no sense, and we need some fresh ideas?
I mean, it is always slightly awkward that we don't operate a separate pool, that the win price determines the each-way price. And so you do get, when there's long odds on favourites, a disproportionate, you know, element of safety in the each-way prices. But if you just had a place market, it would be different. If you do look at the exchanges, that's where they're better. Yes, maybe it's a bit stodgy, maybe it's a bit stolid, maybe you require a degree to understand some of the bets. The difficulty is, if you decide that getting on is an issue and you want to make it a pool bet, then you need liquidity. And that's where a lot of the arguments fall down about pool betting, because in order to get liquidity, you need understanding. And, you know, Bert has a far better brain than I do as regards betting, but I think it's fair to say that I do have quite a good mathematical background, but I did have to read the article several times before I really understood where we were going. Then I did, but I'm not sure my casual race goer who came with Invades on Ascot on Saturday would have been that understanding of what was being proposed. But I do take the central point about making it more dynamic.
How many of the Invades crew do you think are punting?
I think they're punting, but I think at a low...
Very, you know, a fun maybe 1 or 2 races, a £5 win on the nicest colours or the name that they like. You know, it's a totally different dynamic for...
I can tell you a good story at Exeter, actually, in the sense that there was a massive price winner, and I can't remember the name, I forgot. It was a 200 to 1 winner or 150 to 1 winner on a student day, and it had a slightly studenty name, and so the tote, it's their second most expensive tote guarantee day, because the actual dividend should have been £93, but of course they matched the SPs, and they had to take an escorted person over with £4,000 worth of cash to the lad who'd had 20 quid on the tote, and it cost them effectively overall 16 grand. So, you know, it is based a little bit on names, etc., but they do bet. They do. You have to prove your age before you go on the coach. It's all well regimented and well organised. And bookmakers know they can take bets off those people, but I doubt the understanding is what was required to understand exactly what Bert was getting.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.